We're in the Diet Burble kitchen and tonight we're going to make a batch of Joes Granola. In front of you, you can see the ingredients that we're going to use this evening. I've got in my pan my oats, my oat bran and the puffed rice. It's not Rice Krispies as you can see. I've also got my cinnamon, my fruit juice is already measured out. I've got my coconut oil, the sweetener ready. I've got a little extra liquid to see if I can make this turn into clumps. And then I've got my last ingredients that I add through the end. My oven's on, my baking pans are ready, so let's get started. So the next step in the method is to combine all of your main ingredients together in a large bowl. I'm using my Sunday roasting pan because that's the biggest thing that I have to use. And I've just used my hand, so nothing's gone everywhere, thankfully. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my fruit juice to my sweetener pan. It may freak you out to see how much sweetener there is actually in my pan, but here goes. I've also got my coconut oil in there as well, so the next thing we've got to do is to combine all of this and bring it to the boil. So I've mixed the fruit juice in with the sweetener, and as you can see it's not too horrendous, so I have got a bit of a liquid that I can reduce down to a syrup. So I'll see you again in about 5 or 10 minutes. So this has been reducing for the last 5 minutes. I'm going to turn it off because I think it's reduced enough. It's kind of thick and syrupy. There's not very much liquid, so I think I'm going to turn it off now and I'm just going to pour it into my mixture. Right, so we're going to incorporate all of this liquid into the mixture. It's not very much, but I wouldn't worry too much. It's a little bit like making the base of a cheesecake, and you just have to keep mixing this together just to make sure everything's coated. Okay, so I've just spent the last couple of minutes combining the syrup with the dried ingredients. Everything's coated and there are a few little clumps. I don't know if you can see it here, but it's certainly not going to make a very clumpy granola. I'm not sure that granola is the right term to use for what it is that we're making. So I'm going to add a little bit more liquid in. I've got an extra 200 mils measured out. I'm going to add half, mix it in and see how we get on. Okay, so I've added an extra 100 ml of water to the mixture. I've given it a stir for a good couple of minutes and we are getting some clumps that are starting to form. I'm going to throw in the rest of the liquid, give it another stir and see where we're at. And if necessary, add a little bit more water. So I've added another 200 ml of water. I thought I'd go hell for leather on this one. So all in all, I've added an extra 400 ml of water along with what's in the recipe. Giving it a mix for a good couple of minutes, and there's definite clumps. If you put this into a baking pan and compress it a little bit, it should produce clumps at the end of it. It is much heavier and much wetter mix than I've made before, so I'm going to spoon this into some of my baking foil dishes and hopefully it's going to come out as I'm expecting it to. So my granola is now ready in the oven to dry out. I've got my oven set quite low. The recipe says 180 degrees, but I've gone for more 140 degrees. The reason for that is you are looking to dry out the mixture rather than cooking it. So you need to do it for a longer period of time because you need the moisture to evaporate. Otherwise, when you have this in storage, it's going to start to grow mould, and of course you don't want that because it's quite expensive to make. The one thing I will say is that I have used the exact amount of sweetener that the recipe calls for. The first time I made it, I only used, I think it was 75 grams of sweetener. This time, using the whole lot, it does feel a lot stickier. It almost feels like the glue that binds it together. So I think you do have to add all of the sweetener, but time will tell when this comes out of the oven in a few hours' time. So we're about 30 minutes into the drying out process, and the feel of it is still quite wet. There are clumps forming, so I'm quite hopeful. But because of the extra volume of liquid that we've added, I think it's 400 ml of water in addition to the recipe liquids, I think it's going to take at least another hour and a half or so to dry out. But best be safe than sorry, I don't want a mouldy mixture. Right, so about an hour and a half into the drying out process, and I can definitely see signs of clumps, so that's pretty good. It's not quite there yet, so we'll give it another quarter of an hour and we'll see how we go. So we're coming up on an hour and 45 minutes of drying time in the oven, and I would say that this is almost done. I've definitely got some clumps. You can see a nice big one there and a few there. It's not the kind of bake where you've had to dry it out and then break it apart. We didn't make it that wet to begin with, and I think that's a little bit over the top. I'm going to give it another 5 minutes just to make sure, because obviously when this goes into storage, I don't want this to go mouldy because I've taken it out too soon. So another 5 minutes and we're done. So the granola is back in its original pan. I've stirred through the last of the ingredients. I don't know if you can see here, but we do have some very definite clumps. So I'm really happy with the final result. Just to recap, we did follow the recipe to the letter. We added all the sweetener, which I know that you don't like to do, and I can understand the reasons behind that. But to be honest, I think that the sweetener and also the fruit juice is the binding agent for this recipe and not the water we added. Obviously, we did add an extra 400ml of water in 2 batches. So 200ml, good stir, 200ml, good stir. We also changed the cooking temperature. We reduced that from 180 to 140, but we also increased the drying out time. It was about 2 hours. Just judge it yourself, just check the mixture yourself, and just make sure it's not burning or catching, and just move it around. And when you can feel that it's dry, then it's ready. So I hope that you're happy with your final result, and hopefully there's no mystery now to making Joes Granola. The only thing I need to do now is weigh this and portion it out and have my breakfast. Thank you for watching.